Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Laura Prada from our Telesur studios in Caracas, in Venezuela. We begin with our news. You stay with us. We begin with our news. We begin talking about Venezuela. Thousands of young people have been marching in Venezuela to celebrate Youth Day and the anniversary of a major battle for independence. Members of the youth branch of the ruling PSUV, the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, along with other student and social movements, joined the march to the presidential palace in Miraflores. Youth Day in Venezuela is celebrated on February 12 as Victory Day to commemorate the Battle of Victory led by Felix Rivas in 1814.
Face you in the future. The rest of the 21st century belongs to you.
Yo llamo a la juventud.
I call on the youth, you and your leaders, to keep up mobilization permanently, to keep up your work of education and developing awareness, because an aware, critical youth is capable of making its way along all the paths that will face you in the future. The rest of the 21st century belongs to you.
And a new group of 250 Venezuelans living in Peru have been repatriated as part of the President Nicolás Maduro's governmental plan return to the homeland. The group has been flown back to Venezuela on the state-owned airline Conviasa, defying recent U.S. sanctions on the company. This is the second group repatriated from Peru this year. The return to the homeland plan was launched by President Nicolás Maduro in 2018 to facilitate the return of Venezuelans living abroad after a spike in reports of mistreatment, xenophobia, and labor abuse.
I don't have a job. That's the reason we went back. It's also for evaluating the quality of life. The quality of life for the Venezuelan means much more than being working to it. The Venezuelan is accustomed to education, mainly education, have quality of life, and here not found that quality of life. Regarding flights invites or sanctions, it's sad and regrettable how every day they are closing the country, because they not only sanction people, they sanction that food does not enter, and that is why they have other Venezuelans migrant.
When we arrived, we found the harsh reality of xenophobia. The mistreatment of people at work always felt wrong to me. They didn't pay me as well. It was a forced labor, and the truth is that we are returning because we couldn't bear this anymore. And I recommend people not to come because it's really hard, and it's not easy as they believe.
And family members of Colombia's so-called false positive victims have stacked a protest in front of the main court of the Special Jurisdiction for Peace. The group of protesters demanded that retired Army General Mario Montoya, who appeared at the Special Jurisdiction for Peace court, takes responsibility for the false positive killings that took place under his command. False positive refers to about 5,000 civilians who were killed by Colombian soldiers between 1988 and 2014 and later presented as guerrillas to gain military benefits. Montoya, a former commander of the Colombian National Army, gave his testimony regarding the false positive killings at a trial that involved 41 victims and 15 judicial representatives. So far, Montoya has been mentioned in 11 testimonies by lower-ranking military personnel. And Brazilian indigenous people have protested against the government's new mining bill that was unveiled by President Jair Bolsonaro last week. They are rejecting the proposed legislation which seeks to open mining and farming activities in the once protected Amazon rainforest. The Aboriginals who live in and protect the forest says commercial activities will destroy the environment.
We are against mining on indigenous land because of deforestation, because it is harmful not only for our indigenous people, but also for the whites. And without the land, there is no way to survive, because the land is our mother.
We change topic. A former chief executive of Mexico's state oil company, Pemex, accused of corruption, has been arrested in Spain. Emilio Lozoya is accused of accepting $10 million in bribes from Brazilian construction giant Odebrecht. He has been on the run since last May, serving as Pemex chief from 2012 and 2018. Lozoya was also a top advisor to former President Enrique Peña Nieto and allegedly took bribes to help fund Nieto's presidential campaign bid. He denies all the accusations, but his lawyers says that Lozoya has yet to decide whether to fight extradition from Spain or return voluntarily to Mexico. And the Organization of American States is preparing to choose its new Secretary General for 2020-2025 period. The Permanent Council of the OAS met on Wednesday to receive the candidates María Fernanda Espinosa from Ecuador and Hugo de Sela from Peru and the current Secretary General Luis Almagro. They presented their proposals and initiative for the organization. The election will be held on March 20th when the OAS will also choose an Assistant Secretary General. And the former president of United Nations General Assembly and former foreign minister of Ecuador, María Fernanda Espinosa, presented her perspective for the OAS. If elected, she will be the first woman to lead the OAS.
We are rich in diversity. We can also be wealthy in unity. We have a decision to make. Either we commit to moving forward to a new, powerful stage in the history of the organization, or we simply maintain the status quo, continuing along the same path, content with frustration and lack of meaningful response to the great challenges we face. The OAS is irreplaceable. However, institutions must change with the times. They must grow and evolve. We now must face the challenge of renewing, revitalizing, and rejuvenating the OAS.
And like this, we go for a first break here from the South. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Telesur English and on my account at Laura P. Telesur. You stay with us.
Telesur Reports presents.
No fueron 30 pesos, no fue el alza del metro, ¿no? Lo que se desencadena este octubre insurrecto de un Chile que realmente se pone de pie. Y un Chile que demuestra que finalmente le han quitado todo menos la dignidad.
Creo que alcanzamos la madurez de darnos cuenta de que el sistema neoliberal nos ataca profundamente a cada uno de nosotros y que la salida es unirse, luchar y formarse también.
We are back with our news. Anti-government protests have resumed in Guinea ahead of constitutional referendum scheduled for the 1st of March. After a break for a few weeks, protesters have returned to streets to denounce a proposed constitutional change, which they say the country's President Alpha Conde plans to use to stay in power. However, various parts of the capital, Conakry, have been left deserted as some people choose to stay indoors, fearing for a police crackdown which had claimed lives in recent protests.
There are a lot of problems right now in Guinea. Our children are not going to school. We don't know what's going on. The FNDC people, too, every day it's a mess. Even if it's not a mess, it's really still a mess. We are fed up with it.
And a new report by the International Monetary Fund says South Africa remains one of the most unequal societies in the world. According to the report, the top 20% of the population controls over 68% of national wealth, while the bottom 40% holds only a partly 7%. The report also notes that despite strides made by the African National Congress-led government to address the legacy of apartheid, black people continue to be the worst affected by poverty. 93% of the 30 million people living below the poverty line are black. We continue talking about South Africa. Supporters of former South African President Jacob Zuma have vowed to defend him from what they say is persecution by the government of Cyril Ramaphosa. The group, calling itself Radical Economic Transformation Forces, claimed that there is an orchestrated plan to destroy the legacy of Zuma by a group of individuals opposed to the former president's attempt to increase the participation of black people in the country's economy. They have accused Ramaphosa of being an agent of white monopoly capital.
The same power dynamics and powerful interest groups, with as the common denominator white monopoly capital and their fronting agents, are involved. Therefore, our clarion call for justice for President Zuma will always go hand in hand with our insistence that white privilege and preferential treatment and white economic domination and control of our economy must come to an end.
Malawi's Electoral Commission Chief Jane Ansah have defended the institution's conduct in the running of the 2018 elections, which have since been annulled. Last week, Malawi's Constitutional Court declared the May election, which gave President Peter Mutharika a narrow win, null and void, citing irregularities. Appearing before a parliament committee, Ansah admitted that corrections fluid was applied to resolve cheats, but dismissed accusations that it meant one candidate was favored than the others.
We called the auditors to ask them why they had allowed this. They told us that everything was all right. The TPEX was used.
And the UN Security Council on Wednesday adopted a resolution calling for a lasting ceasefire in war-torn Libya, endorsing a roadmap for ending the conflict in Libya and condemning the recent increase in violence. The resolution received 14 votes in favor, with Russia abstaining. It condemns the recent blockade of oil facilities and demands that all countries not to intervene in the conflict and uphold weapons embargo. It also recognizes the key role of African nations in ending the violence, notably the African Union and League of Arab States.
With the adoption of this resolution, the Security Council sent an important signal for peace in Libya, reaffirming the concrete commitments of all participants of the Berlin Conference. It is crucial for Libya that we are able to send this signal of unity.
Citizens are facing a national crisis in Sudan due to an acute shortage of bread, fuel, and foreign currency. Children were among the adults who waited in long queues to purchase bread and refill their tanks. This current scarcity has hampered the nation's economic revival 10 months after the ousting of Omar al-Bashir, years of conflict in Darfur and other regions, and the secession of South Sudan in 2011 left the country's economy in chaos.
We are suffering a lot because of the lack of fuel. Since the early morning, we get up and stand in the queue for bread. Students have even left schools to stand in the queue to get bread, fuel, gas, and transportation.
What our country has witnessed, from shortages and the supplies and high prices, is just a scene that reflects the miserable economic situation that has been inherited from the era.
And like this, we go for another short break here in From the South. We'll be right back.
A review of the world news that investigates, incites analysis, and induces criticism, because every event has a context.
Pusimos el punto en I.
Dotting the I. Saturdays, only on Telesur.
We are back with our news. This Wednesday, former director of Mexican Petroleum Pemex, Emilio Lozoya, was arrested for the alleged crime of money laundering and criminal association. According to the National High Court of Spain, Emilio Lozoya is to attend on the second court of the Spain Audiencia Nacional this Thursday, where he is to hold responsibility for allegedly receiving bribes as well as for criminal association. The Pemex Attorney General Alejandro Gertz thanked the support of Interpol and the Spanish police and the apprehension of former director of Mexican Petroleum Company, who was traced at the beginning of this year, 2020, in the province of Mala after 9 months of investigations. In Italy, Senate has stripped far-right opposition leader Matteo Salvini of immunity, allowing prosecutors to put him on trial for illegally detaining migrants during the time he served as Interior Minister. Salvini had refused to allow 116 rescued migrants to disembark to the Gregoretti Coast Guard boat, where they had been languishing for about a week in difficult conditions. A deal was eventually reached with other European states who host them. Salvini faces up to 15 years in prison if found guilty.
Everyone in Italy, whether they like me or not, knew and knows that by voting for the League, by voting for Salvini, we would have done everything to block the arrival of illegal immigrants.
And the Swiss government has ordered an inquiry into global encryption company CryptoAct after revelations it was owned by US and German intelligence. An investigation by the Washington Post and German public broadcaster ZDF revealed that starting from 1970, the CIA and its German counterpart, the BND, I must say, rigged encryption machines produced by CryptoAct so that they could hack communications. More than 120 countries, including Iran, Saudi Arabia, and many South American countries, bought CryptoAct hardware for embassies, administrative offices, and government institutions. We change topic. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, who has won the New Hampshire Democratic primary. Sanders, who led the polls going into the vote, got 26.2% of the ballot cast, beating his closest rival, former South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who amazed 24.4%. Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar was a distant third with 19.7%. It was another bad night for former Vice President Joe Biden, who sank to a disastrous 5th place, getting just over 8% of the votes.
Now, our campaign is not just about beating Trump, it is about transforming this country. It is about having the courage to take on Wall Street, the insurance companies, the drug companies, the fossil fuel industry, the military-industrial complex.
And United States President Donald Trump has finally come clean about his so-called Middle East peace plan, confirming that it prioritizes Israel's political interests. Reading out the details of the plan at the White House, Trump made it clear that the deal was aimed at securing East Jerusalem as Israel's capital, further stripping Palestinian ownership of the territory. Trump's proposal has triggered widespread protest since it was announced last month.
Under this vision, Jerusalem will remain Israel's undivided, very important, undivided capital.
We have updates from the coronavirus. 2 Chinese nationals hospitalized in Russia with the coronavirus have fully recovered and were discharged. Russian officials reported on Wednesday a Chinese tourist treated in China, eastern Siberia, was discharged on Wednesday after a series of tests revealed he was no longer carrying the virus. Likewise, a hospital in Tyumen in western Siberia who also discharged a female Chinese student. Officials said both patients suffer from a mild form of COVID-19 disease and no longer posed a risk to the others.
The patient had been treated in our hospital. He got the whole set of necessary diagnostic and curative procedures according to standards and orders. Today, he has been discharged.
And dozens of Japanese took refuge at the beachside resort of Katsura to wait out a 14-day self-imposed quarantine after being evacuated from China's Hubei province, where the new coronavirus originated. On Wednesday, after final test results confirmed all 197 evacuees were free of the virus, the first handful began heading home, while countries including the United States, France, and Britain have obligated their evacuated citizens to go into quarantine on their arrival. Japanese officials said there was no legal framework permitting them to enforce the same measures. And a total of 355 medical workers from southwest China's Yunnan province set off for Jiangning City in Hubei on Wednesday morning to help fight the epidemic. China is sparing no efforts in its fight against the novel coronavirus COVID-19, as is known, with additional medical teams and supplies from across the country being rushed to central China's Hubei province, the epicenter of the outbreak. The third batch of medical team from central China's Hunan provinces has also left for Hungan City in Hubei to provide more medical resources for the city to win the fight against the epidemic. In addition, 3,000 tons of emergency productions of surgical masks, protective clothing, and other special raw materials are said to be sent from northwest China, Lanzhou City, to markets in East and South China.
General Secretary Xi Jinping has pointed out that medical workers must play a mainstream role in the fight against epidemic and go out to treat patients. His remarks give our medical staff more sense of mission and responsibility, and we will definitely complete the task.
It took us 24 hours to prepare 396 boxes of materials, mainly protective clothing, protective hats, masks, food covers, gloves, and other related protective supplies, as well as necessary daily necessities to keep them warm and moisture-proof.
Like this, we come to the end of this news brief. Of course, you can find this and more on our website, telsurenglish.net, where you can read opinion articles, watch the special interviews, and do follow-ups to the most outstanding informations in the world. You continue with us with Telesur, always together, connecting our global pulse. Until next time, thank you for watching.